Any way you slice it, the story of Yosef and his brothers, this is not something we can digest. Who are we talking about? A bunch of kids, sibling rivalry. Talking about the Shiftei Koh. The sons of Yaakov Avinu were not simple human beings. And they weren't kids at the time either. What's his business? He goes and tells on them. They get jealous. Chazal tell us, Rashi brings it. Yosef tells his father that they were chashudim. They were suspect. Of what? Aver min achai. They were tearing limbs off animals and eating them while the animal was still alive. I mean, that's the one dietary law that applies to all of humanity. That they were mezalzel b'nei hashvachas. They belittled their own brothers who were born of the maidservants of Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah. They belittled them. Ben Adam l'chavero. And they were chashudim al arayis. Immorality. Now, please. A, did he believe that himself? And B, Yaakov Avinu, he didn't stop him? He's coming and telling Yaakov these terrible things. They're obviously baseless. What's going on here? The Maharal in Gur Aryeh turns this into something that is so important. It says, yes, Yosef is a tzaddik, and that's the problem. Yosef was called tzaddik even relative to his brothers. He was greater, he was holding somewhere else. He had sensitivities that they didn't. Of course, we're not talking about blatantly pulling a limb off an animal and eating it. We're not talking about anything that was clear sin. But in the eyes of Yosef and his standards, he saw something that was not befitting the brothers. He didn't like their eating habits. In his eyes, they were tantamount to tearing a limb off an animal and eating it. They didn't eat with that same refinement that he would have expected. Their treatment of their siblings from the maidservants, from Bilhah and Zilpah, you can be sure they weren't calling them names. The brothers were not choshed on Onol's Devarim for real. He felt that they were not being treated with the same kind of respect as the other brothers. And to him that was unjustified. That was a breach of Ben Adam L'Chavero. Obviously, Yosef, who was known as tzaddik, especially for his standing up to temptation and immorality, you can be sure that his standards of tznius were different than everybody else's. When he accuses his brothers of immorality, there too it's a matter of standards, subtleties that just weren't good enough for him. And Yaakov Avinu understood. Yaakov saw the difference between Yosef and the rest of them. He was holding somewhere else. All right. So, if that's the case, he's right, isn't he? The moral of the story is that as you grow and as you become greater and more sensitive, there's a tendency to become more critical of everyone around you. The problem is that if you're really growing, although when it comes to judging yourself, things get tougher and tougher, your standards get higher, when it comes to others, on the contrary, your understanding of them, your acceptance of them has to grow with you. Here's where he failed. And yes, we understand why they were angry. We definitely understand that they saw him as a real threat and a threat to the whole future of the Jewish nation. You know, we find almost a parallel. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were in a cave. Right? They ran away from the Romans. They were hiding and they were learning, and the heavens open and they got all the secrets. They were so holy. And they first emerged from the cave and everything they saw burst into flames. Their standards were so high. They spent years with themselves and Hashem alone. There was nothing of the human experience that they could tolerate. They just gazed upon it and it burst into flames. They went back. They hadn't learned enough. They emerged the second time. So what would you have thought? Before they opened their eyes, everything just burst into flames, huh? No, the second time they were greater than that. The second time they were able to look at this world with a more accepting and understanding eye. Yeah, and they see someone collecting his flowers there. What's it for? It's for Shabbos. One is for Zochur and one is for Shomor. They understood. Because now they were greater. A greater level than everything bursting into flames was being able to understand. Understand people that are somewhere else. You know, this is a house of growth. This is a place where everyone changes standards, develops sensitivities they never had before. Whatever sensitivities they did have are fine-tuned. The subtleties, the nuances. You learn about how careful you've got to be not to say a negative word about someone else. You learn how careful you've got to be that you're not causing ill feelings among people by slipping and saying something that can insinuate someone feeling less favorably about someone else. You learn all that. And then you leave the walls of the yeshiva and you find yourself among others that aren't so fortunate. and Uncle Harry and Aunt Gussie and the dinner table, oy vey. And what do you think of them? What do you think of them? These nobodies. If that's what happens, then you haven't grown enough. You got to be so big that you can see their greatness, despite the fact that they were never sensitized. Some of their greatness is still raw. Some of their greatness really shines through if you only bother being receptive. We've got to grow ourselves. We've got to make demands on ourselves to no end. Yes, we do have to become more and more sensitive. And as we grow, we have to be even more attuned to others. Understand where they're at. We've got a big mission. We have a whole nation that has to be turned around. A relatively small minority of Klal Yisrael carries with it the obligation to bring all of Klal Yisrael to where they should be. How do we do that? First and foremost, we've got to love and respect. People are so quickly turned off when they feel we're being judgmental. Often they feel that way when we're not being judgmental. They do feel themselves judged. But often they're right. We're being diplomatic, but deep down, we have a hard time respecting their values. We think they just don't use their brains. And we've got some good questions. But what do you think? Everyone out there is dumb? People out there are just stupid? Yeah, there are some things that society has just taken for granted, and people don't bother asking questions or rethinking. But other than that, there's a lot of intelligence. There's a lot of idealism. Talk about Jews. Jews, they're fighting for all the causes. There's idealism. There's integrity. Our brothers, they're good. They're good people. Who is to say that there's more brain power only in the yeshiva than out there? We've got to learn to respect. To respect, value. And remember, just because they don't share our sensitivities, that doesn't mean they're not great. Jews are great. Some of their greatness is untapped. And if anything, it's got to be accessed. It only will if we really believe in it. We've got to learn to grow in our understanding of others. Now, don't confuse this with what the world considers tolerance. Tolerance means you've got to accept falsehood. You've got to accept everything wrong. Everyone has the right to their own morality. That's not what it's about. There is absolute right and wrong. I mean, face it. There's a creator, and he determines right and wrong, not society. We often struggle with this too. But we know there is truth. But we must appreciate and respect human beings, especially Jews. They're our brothers. With all their lack of sensitivity, with all the values that have to be readjusted, realigned to be in sync with the will of the Creator, with all of that. There's so much greatness out there. We've got to learn to see it. And if we don't, then we're not great. If we don't, then our growth is lopsided. There's a whole aspect of our existence that hasn't grown with us. And look what it caused. That's what the Chumash is telling us. Look what it caused. The division of Klal Yisrael, where we read in the Nevi'im, this will never be healed till the end of days. When Mashiach comes, he's going to have to take the two pieces of wood, Yehuda and Ephraim, and put them together and turn them into one. For all of Gullus, Klal Yisrael is filled with disagreement. And it's not all just disagreement in Pshat and Apasik. There's so much strife on all levels. Some is personal. When will there be real unity, meaningful unity? Only the end of days, only when Mashiach comes. And we got to make it happen. So yes, keep growing, but don't neglect this side of it. Become more sensitive, more demanding of ourselves, and even more understanding of others.